The Independent Electoral Commission said there were clear social media disinformation campaigns in this year's provincial and national elections. They said they had to work extra hard to share correct information and processes on how things work. The Film and Publications Board also released a report saying that it found misinformation and disinformation about elections even in the months leading up to this year's vote. Siphumelele Zondi is a multimedia and journalism lecturer at the Durban University of Technology. He joins us now to talk about this. Thank you so much for your time. So even ahead of these elections, I mean, we saw a huge, observer conference on social media usage and education around the dangers of mis and disinformation. But we still saw a number of incorrect campaigns going around. Perhaps let's start by defining what misinformation and disinformation is.
All right, so first of all, hello, and thank you very much for inviting me. Misinformation is sometimes information that doesn't quite hit the mark, and it could be just by mistake that information was shared, and it doesn't, it's not entirely true, and maybe even those that are sharing this information don't mean it for malicious purposes. Now, disinformation now is completely different, because that's when the intent is very malicious, it's done deliberately, and it is done for purposes of misleading those that are receiving this information. And that's what the IEC, I suppose, was referring to when they said there were clear disinformation attempts that were going on around this election, that this was a deliberate campaign to mislead with the information that was being shared.
Now, I mean, we also saw the Film and Publications Board, earlier this year, around about March, withdrawing a controversial notice, that was gazetted, suggesting that, of course, that the members or service providers be punished, through either serving time behind bars or even being paying huge fines if found guilty of spreading misinformation online. Of course, they withdraw that because of a public outcry. But how do we go about correcting or even, just holding those accountable who spread information, around about especially important events like the elections?
It depends on what the intention was, because with disinformation, there are other laws in the country that look at issues of security and the sharing of information. You would think about, for example, the unrest in 2021, where there were even hearings and commissions around what happened at that time, and it was found that a lot of information was disinformation that was shared on social media that led to what happened during that 2021 July unrest. So there are other laws in the country that can look at the criminality, especially if it's spread intentionally to cause harm to individuals, to the security of the state as well.
I mean, just looking at the role of the IEC, for instance, saying that during the process of finding disinformation as they ran this year's election, that, saying, of course, that it was too much. I mean, when you look at what was, spread out there, before the election and even during the voting processes, I mean, how or what role do you think voter education, for instance, would have played for voters to be educated even before such information is spread?
You spoke about a conference that took place leading up to the elections. So it's not to say that there was no education, because there were various campaigns that were trying to inform the public on how to guard against information and disinformation. by the way, because if you look at social media, you still are coming across information that, for example, how the parliament makeup works. I came across something along those lines, the numbers that need to be in parliament. And then I remember shifting at a certain point to do my own research. And then I realized that actually what I'm finding and the information that is on this post that is now saying forwarded many times on WhatsApp, they don't quite correlate. So there have been campaigns, but maybe there need to be campaigns on the ground, in the communities, with individuals who may not be constantly on social media, individuals who may not be scholars of media and technologies that may be educated, individuals that may not be educated, rather, on how these things work. So maybe there need to be campaigns down in the community, in wider spaces, as opposed to high-level conferences, as opposed to high-level discussions that may take place in internet spaces.
And I mean, let's talk about the dangers then of spreading misinformation or disinformation, even online, even if it's not, around these elections. We've seen how some, celebrities, for lack of a better word, have, also found themselves on the other side of this misinformation, which for some people turned to be, dangerous in the sense that they had to then up their security, in some instances even uproot themselves from one province to another because of, the backlash that they were receiving, from community members or even, civil society. How dangerous is it?
Well, it can be dangerous because, especially when it comes to issues of, let's talk about the elections, for example. If you then are constantly questioning the credibility of elections through spreading disinformation, then the public might start questioning the body that is running the elections, in this case, the Independent Electoral Commission. South Africa is not the first country to face this. It was found that in 2022 in Kenya, disinformation was being shared far and wide as well, and other parts of the world as well. It might impact on how people receive the outcome of the election if disinformation was spread to sway public opinion to a particular direction, because then they would think something else, and then when actual results come out, they show something else. And it might lead to even riots, as we saw in July 2021, that people were, there was a lot of incitement that was taking place on social media, and a lot of information being shared to people on social media through voice notes. This time we are seeing deep fakes as well. I've even seen a deep fake, something I identified immediately as a deep fake of two SABC journalists, and sitting in a studio and having a conversation. But when you then look at this video carefully and you start to study it, you realize that it's not a real conversation that would have taken place. But not everyone is going to be armed with those tools and that type of analysis to try and to pick it up. So it can be quite dangerous, especially for a democracy, for security of a state as well.
Thank you so much, Siphumelele, for that information. Really appreciate it. Siphumelele Zondi is a multimedia and journalism lecturer at the Durban University of Technology. Let's take a quick break. We'll be back straight after this. Stay with us.